Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see we made it. Give a hand to yourself for being able to get up on the second day this early. Yes. I mean, we didn't go to karaoke last night. That explains it probably. But anyhow, I am very, very excited and honored that I get to open the second day. And I will do that by telling you a little story. Now, this is a story about an organization that I worked with up until June this year. And the name of the organization is De Rechtspraak. And if you are Dutch or happen to speak Dutch, you already know that my pronunciation is excellent, so you're welcome. I'll have more of these. So I was working for a subdivision, which was the Ivo Rechtspraak, and I don't know what Ivo stands for, except that it was the IT service provider. So the Rechtspraak is Dutch for the judiciary. And the Ivo Rechtspraak would be building all kinds of mainly web services for judges and lawyers and really the public. So if you had any dealings with the courts, then probably you would be using one of their services. In structure, the Rechtspraak was made up mostly of value teams. If you're into team topologies, it's very aligns pretty much with what they call the stream-aligned teams. And these value teams would be mostly cross-functional, almost, I think, exclusively cross-functional, actually. So they would be made up of developers, testers, and SREs is what they called it. It's basically everyone who's doing any kind of OPSI stuff. The tech stack was by and large Java and .NET. There was some JavaScript in the front end, but the applications that we dealt with were pretty much exclusively Java and .NET. And the teams were in what they called bases. So every base included between 4 and 10 different teams. Now I was in a base called the infrastructure base, and the team that I was in was called the container management platform. Now, as the name suggests, we built a platform that managed containers. It was built on OpenShift, I think 4.16. And by the time I joined, 4.16 was end of life, so we had to move everything to a new platform that was the Modulaire Rechtspraak platform. Again, you're welcome. So as that name suggests, is the modular platform for the judiciary. And so we were like in the midst of migrating stuff, and that was obviously a lot of fun. And then there's me. My name is Lian. I am a platform engineer working for myself. I've been doing public speaking for about 10 years now. There was a time in my life where I sidestepped the tech thing a little bit, and I started getting into stage performance. So I was doing, or still am doing, stand-up comedy, musical theater, improvisation theater. I'm currently in Amsterdam in a musical improv troupe, which is super fun. So we make up a musical on the spot. It's great. If you have a chance to see anything like that, you should definitely do it. It's great. And yeah, that's me in the muscle shirt, I guess is what you call it. But also you might know me as the chief karaoke officer. So I help organize karaoke parties at the end usually of conferences. We're planning one for Amsterdam KubeCon next year. So please talk to me about this after the talk. I have stickers as well. Yeah. So anyhow, let's come back to something technical here. So let's take a step back and think about why we decided to kind of converge on this idea of platforms. And the way that it happened for me was that I was starting out in web development. And when I started, which was many, many moons ago, we basically deployed by having these scripts on our laptops, on our local machines. So when you start in your company, your colleague who will onboard you just gives you these scripts, and then you have to kind of change them because obviously your machine is different from their machine. And yeah, that's how we kind of like deployed. We had this build script that would create all these artifacts that we needed, and then we had a deploy script that would maybe SFTP our artifacts onto the production environment. This was all very serious and secure. But then, someone very smart decided, oh, maybe if we're all having versions of the script, that just makes onboarding and everything very complicated. So why don't we extract them and put them on a centralized service that lives outside of our local machines, so we don't have to all maintain and manage like a different version of the script. So that's what we did, and it came with a bunch of advantages and disadvantages. For one thing, these services were very loosely coupled. From a user perspective, it would work like this, that a user would call on this build service, can you please look into the code repository and give me the latest version of the artifacts that I will need to deploy? And then we'll take that image and then pass it on to the deployment service that lives next to the production environment. And then, I think we were using AMIs at that time. The service would just handle the deployment and the configuration. Now, the problem here is that these services, as I said, are loosely coupled, so they started to diverge a little bit. Part of the reason is also because of Conway's law, again, something that if you're familiar with team topologies, you might have heard of. Basically, that law states that the design of your system will reflect the design of your communication structure. And because those services tended to be maintained by individual teams, the way that if the teams don't talk to each other, the services also tended to not talk to each other. So now I'm getting this image from my build script or my build service, but I still have to do maybe some custom stuff so it's able to talk to the production service, or the production service is able to use my image, because again, we are kind of like moving away from each other because no one's actually looking at anyone else, no one's eating their own dog food. No one's looking at the full entire flow of the delivery process. So then we're here, and someone came up with this great idea of building platforms. And the idea there is basically just that the services now live in a single entity that we call internal developer platform, which is great because now we are thinking about the golden path. So from a user perspective, all I can see is the platform, and there's a production environment somewhere on the side. And then I will talk to the deployment service inside the platform and ask, please deploy the latest version to production. Now, internally, the deployment service will talk to the build service, and that build service might build new images every single time someone pushes a change to the repository, or it will on demand just build an image when requested. We'll pass that image to the deployment service. The deployment service will, do whatever it needs to be done. And from the user perspective, all I'm doing is a single request, a single call. Everything else is hidden for me. And also, I don't have to care about how that image is being created and how I need to configure it so it can be deployed in the way that I want it to be deployed. Which leads us to the first problem that I've encountered while I was working there, which I call bricks versus builds. Now, as platform engineers, as platform teams, we thought of the platform as building blocks. So we would provide building blocks, but the developers are the ones who then have to actually build something. Now, the developers then, they came in and they kind of expected us to build an entire house that they could just move into. And they didn't understand that they had to actually build the house. And some developers really wanted a really fancy and modern house with many cool new features. And then others just wanted something more classic, something timeless, something that was flawlessly executed. And because we never really talked about the vision and the scope of the platform, everyone just kind of imagined their own perfect house that they wanted and was really, really disappointed when that's not what we built. And that caused a lot of friction and also, was the reason why adoption was really stalling. And really that, to me, it comes down to the central idea of platform product thinking, is that developers are clients, users for services, but they are contributors to platforms. They are part of the group that creates a platform and that owns the platform and decides and shapes how the platform actually looks like. So if we're looking back at this evolution, what I can see here is that the services inside the platform, they originated from the developers' scripts. They were the original people who built those scripts because they understand what they need and how they need it. So what I'm saying is the real platform services are the scripts we wrote along the way. Which brings us to the next problem. Maybe you've heard about the adage that if you teach a man if you give a man a fish, already messed it up, great. If you give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, then you'll feed him for the rest of his life. Now, when we're doing stuff like enabling developers, what happens is we're confronted with something that some people call the DevOps anti-pattern. What does that mean? So in the olden days, when I started out, we had this. So we had the value teams, the application building teams, and we had the infrastructure team that was running production and was deploying stuff to production. And in between, we had the wall of confusion. You might be familiar with this term. Developers would just throw things over the wall and then just really don't care what happens. And then DevOps came along, and it was the idea of like, you build it, you run it. So what did we do? Well, we replaced the wall of confusion with the canyon of confusion, which basically means that, yes, there's nothing really keeping you from running your own stuff, except you have no idea what you're doing, really. Like, you don't really understand like all the ramifications of running something in production. And I'm not blaming any developers here. Like, they are busy doing their own stuff. It's just like not something that they necessarily signed up to do. So when we're like trying to enable teams, what we're often doing is we're just putting them into this canyon. And now we have the separation layer of, we have value teams on top, we have the platform team on the bottom, and in between we have the enabling team. But really, now we're just giving them fish. We're not teaching them how to fish, right? So actually, these are disabling teams, as well a friend of mine called it, because we're not teaching them anything, right? We're just telling them, well, you just sit back, don't wear your pretty little hat. We're going to tell you exactly how this needs to be done. So instead, good enabling teams should be vertical. They should emerge from the value teams and the platform teams together, right? Like, we should be working together to understand what is the best way of making something happen. As an example, at Evo, some development teams really wanted to run MongoDB instances, or they wanted to use MongoDB, and then one team decided, well, it's just taking too long. I'm just going to run an instance myself. It was MongoDB Enterprise, which actually takes 80 gigs of memory, and obviously exploded the entire platform for everyone, which is when we then realized, maybe limits are a good idea. So we were also learning on the way. But yeah, so the business, which is the group of people that I'm going to blame for everything that went wrong, they decided, well, we're just going to have a enabling MongoDB team in between. Great idea, except the MongoDB team, they were experts in MongoDB, but they did not understand Kubernetes. So now we're spending a big part of our resources now to explain to this yet another team how to do something. So not only did they disable the development teams that really wanted to do it themselves, that just didn't really know how, but also we lost basically a full member of our team because he just basically had to explain Kubernetes to this MongoDB team. So not really the best way to, I think, personally handle this. So what am I saying? What is the right way to do things then? Well, this is my opinion, right? But you heard it here first. I believe you should be treating your platform like it is an open source project, internal open source project. You should be inner sourcing your platform. And the way that I'm thinking about it is that there's two major things that you need to be thinking about. So for one thing, building community is a big part of that. And I'm going to tell you like two examples of communities building that went well or that didn't go so well. When I started, we had this SRE meeting, which was basically a meeting of all the SREs in those value teams coming together and us. And the idea was that we would like exchange ideas, thoughts, updates. By the time that I joined, it was basically dead. It was scarcely attended. It was often canceled like a minute before the meeting was supposed to start. So because there was no agenda usually, it was just like, well, there's this meeting, and then people would just call in or not. So I was thinking, okay, maybe there's something there. Maybe we could make a user group out of this. So I tried to restart it as a forum where everyone can bring in ideas and discuss problems, and we would also give updates on what we're doing with the platform. But the problem is it became kind of more of a tribunal, because what actually happened was that we were having these meetings in the office, and we would be in this meeting room, and then the developers would call in, or the SREs would call in, but they were also in the office. They just decided to not come to the meeting room, and instead we just, you know the Avengers movies when Nick Fury is in front of this big monitor of like foreign dignities, and they just like berate him for like, why didn't you do this? That's basically what it was like, right? We were just staring at this wall of faces that were very, very uninterested, right? And they just like stare us down like, yeah, that was shit, you know. So that didn't feel great. And eventually we replaced the meeting with just a sprint review, because in the end, what I was hoping to achieve was that, you know, if they told us, oh, we would really need something like this, I would say, that's a great idea. Why don't you build it and we'll help you? And the reaction to that was usually, okay, it's not that important. So didn't go so well. Now, on the other hand, there was a meeting that was called the Microservices Guild. And that was something that was actually a meeting that was called by management. So management would actually run those meetings. And it was very unloved, especially by us, because again, we would just go in, be blamed for everything, and then leave again. But you know, the new person who restarted this meeting also, he came up basically, well, he didn't come up with the idea of an agenda, but he decided an agenda would be good. So every time the meeting would come up a week before, he would have this agenda ready, like these are the topics that we're going to discuss. And it wasn't on a voluntary basis. Again, he's the manager, so he can do that, but he would invite people specifically to contribute. So he spent a lot of time kind of figuring out what was being built and what was being done in each of the teams, and then invite them. I heard you're working on this, and that would be really useful. Could you please come to this meeting and talk about it? But the great thing about that was that the focus then shifted kind of from the problem to the solution. So instead of just complaining about, oh, we can't do this and this is really bad, people were talking about the solutions that were introduced, and you know, that really shifted kind of the energy of like, oh yeah, okay, so this looks actually good. It's not quite what we need, but maybe we can tweak a little bit here and there, and then it would be really useful to us. And that was really, really great. I think what I learned from this is that there are some cornerstones to community building. For one thing, you need to be consistent. So the meetings need to be at the same time, same place, with the same faces, kind of, so people kind of get used to, this is a place that's there for me. Another thing is safety. If I'm complaining about something, I need to make sure that I'm safe to say this. I can't deal with the fact that if I say something, I'm going to get pulled out and berated by my manager after the fact, right? So psychological safety is always a very important part of getting people to open up and, you know, be real. Another thing is acknowledgement. So if you're doing something great, you want acknowledgement for that, right? You want people to maybe mention that, oh yeah, Lian did something really great there. But also, if you are, you know, complaining something, you also would like someone to acknowledge, like, yeah, I hear you. I've heard that you have this issue, and I will take care of it. And finally, this is something that, you know, a lot of meetings don't do. And another thing, like next to agendas, follow-ups, action items, right? We're going to be doing these things. Okay, we discussed this. This is how we can address it. This is how we can solve it. And then actually in the next meeting, we would actually talk about the things that we discussed in the last meeting and see, did we actually do anything? If not, why not? Is it maybe not important anymore? That's fine. All of those things can be discussed. There's no law that you have to do things in a specific way. But the important thing is, again, things that were addressed, they have to have come to some kind of resolution, right? And if you're able to like lead like a user group or meeting like this, people will start to be able to trust you. To like, if I air a grievance with you, then it's not just going nowhere. And I think that was a bit of an issue that we had with the SRE meeting. Now the other thing is to build shared libraries. So we were using Azure DevOps pipelines. And listen, I don't have the time to get into like how much I didn't like that. However, one of the things is that it does allow you to build like a library of functions that then you can reuse in your own pipeline. And we tried to build a lot of examples and best practices, how to connect to the cluster, how to build your images, how to run tests, and so on. And we were also able to some degree to test these functions, which was great, because that forced us to eat our own dog food, because then we had to actually use those functions and think about ways to make them work kind of like in a modular way. One thing though is that Azure DevOps does not allow versioning really, so because we needed to make sure everything's backwards compatible, we had to actually misuse branches for versioning, which not my favorite, like not my proudest hour, but you know, you gotta make things work sometimes, and then it's just how it is, right? So, in summary, platforms, really a collaborative effort, right? Like you can't just hire a platform team and just imagine like they're just gonna take care of everything. Maybe your organization is not mature enough for a platform. If the developers are very much in a mindset where they're like, I just wanna consume a service and I don't wanna worry about how things are done and I don't wanna get involved at all, maybe a platform is not for you. Well, if you're building a platform, communicate the scope as often as early as you need it. Something else I tell in my public speaking workshops often is people are not really listening to you the entire time. They will sometimes, you know, when the end happens, when you're like, oh, by the way, this is the final slide, then they wake up again. And with scope communication, like with stuff like that, maybe sometimes you just need to hammer down your main point. Just come back to it again and again and again. Building community. I mean, I love community, and I'm glad we're all here, and I get to know new people and everything. It's the essence, really, of platforms, my opinion. But also, you need to learn to let things go. So that, for me, it was like one of the important things is that sometimes, you know, other people just don't want what you want. Like they just. As I said, some people just want to consume a service, and that is totally fine, right? Just because I think platforms are a good way to solve this problem doesn't mean that everyone else has to also do things exactly the way that I want them to do them, even though I feel like it's better. But yes, so letting things go, very important. And finally, I want to leave you with this quote by one of my favorite people in the world, Miles Borens. I don't actually know what he does right now, but he used to work with JavaScript. That's all I can say. But my favorite quote from him is that APIs deprecate, but being human never will. And that's a quote that really has stuck with me pretty much for my entire career. And that is it. The slides are here. Again, talk to me about karaoke, about theater, about platform engineering, about public speaking, about dropping my stuff on stage. Thank you so much.